What if I told you that the sun god Nika isn't actually the sun god, but maybe actually the god of rebellion, and whenever he reincarnates, it changes the world forever? Not only that, what if I were to also say that Nika and 3 other gods came down from the moon to harvest the resources from the One Piece planet after their advanced civilization on the moon ran completely out? But Nika in the end betrayed them, leading to an endless cycle of war and slavery across the entire One Piece planets. Okay, so for a couple of months now, I've been really deep diving into the ancient, and I mean ancient, history of the One Piece world, and have crafted a theory about divine betrayal, the wrath of the gods, and the spirit of rebellion, all of which lines up pretty nicely with Roger's famous quote about inherited will, the flow of time, and dreams of its people. And today I want to show to you that this beautiful story that Eiichiro Oda has created is actually even more enormous and magnificent than anything that we could have ever imagined. Because today we have part 2 of the 4 Ages of One Piece mega theory I've been working on, so if you haven't seen part 1, let me quickly briefly catch you up to speed here. This is what I call the 4-age model of One Piece, and last time we covered the first age, the Age of Titans. Now in a nutshell, this was a time I believe that existed before godlike aliens came down to the One Piece world from the moon to harvest the resources of this planet. But before we can dive even deeper into the epic past of One Piece and the legendary war that shook the seas, let me tell you about something just as intense. Today's sponsor, Girls Frontline 2 Exilium. Let's just say this isn't just any strategy game. In the latest version, you'll command tactical dolls, each with their unique abilities, intricate backstories, stunning outfits like Macchiato's new ballroom interlude or Tololo's celestial river at dusk, and a bunch of customizable weapons as well. Really, the attention to detail is incredible, and it doesn't stop there. You get to experience 3D immersive interactions in the refitting room and dormitory, whether it's customizing outfits or spending time with your dolls in their rooms. The game really makes you feel connected to your entire team. But when it comes to the actual gameplay, strategy is of course key as well. You'll deploy your dolls based on the terrain, taking advantage of every strategic opportunity to outmaneuver your enemies. Whether you're defending or conquering, every decision counts. And there's more. The platoon system lets you team up and coordinate with other players, adding another layer of depth to the action. Plus, there are tons of rewards waiting for you, like limited time bonuses and generous newbie rewards that help you gear up and dive right into the action. So if you want to experience some crazy good action, just like in One Piece, scan the QR code on screen here or click the link below to join the action in Girls Frontline 2 Exilium, because trust me, you'll love it. And now back to the video. On this still untouched world, I speculate that massive creatures roam the lands, coexisting or antagonizing the civilizations of the world with only a few pieces of evidence left of their existence, like the giant sword of Elbaf or the giant skull and katana on Onigashima. But unfortunately, today almost nobody remembers the Age of Titans because of some, let's just say, divine intervention. Because as I want to show you today, I believe that 4 incredibly powerful gods, the god of earth, forest, rain, and the sun, all came down from the sky to overtake this world from the Titans and conquer the entire One Piece planets. Now, you might already have realized that those are the exact same 4 gods that we learned about in Skypiea, and since we only know the name of the sun god, Nika, I think it makes the most sense to focus on him first in our first chapter of the day, Nika 101. Now, Nika seems to have powers beyond anything that we thought was possible in One Piece, and may have even been able to manifest anything that he imagined into the world itself. Interestingly enough, this lines up with this quote of the mysterious person Willie Gallen that we get when this literal giant ship is falling from the sky in front of the Straw Hats. He says, "Anything that man can imagine is a possibility in reality," and I think there's really no better quote to really describe the truly insane powers of the sun god Nika fruit. Whether that's turning the world into a massive trampoline or using lightning as a spear, Nika can bend reality itself to its will. But I will say, despite how unbelievably powerful the Nika fruit is today, this might actually not have always been the case, and I will get into that in just a moment. For now, I want to cover everything that we can reasonably conclude about this mysterious person, Nika. And first things first, to me, the thing that has really got me so crazily interested in the past of One Piece pre-Void Century to begin with is the fact that Oda has made it pretty clear at this point that Joy Boy and Nika are not the same person. This is pretty much spelled out to us in chapter 1044 when we learned the true name of the Gomu Gomu no Mi is actually the sun god Nika fruit. And Right before that happens, Zunisha remarks that Luffy has the drums of liberation in his heartbeat and then mistakes him for Joy Boy. Then again, during the Egghead Island arc, Emeth, this massive iron giant from the past, comes back to life thanks to this drum-like heartbeat as well and tells Luffy that he looks just like Joy Boy. And then of course Kaido, the man absolutely obsessed with Joy Boy, is unbelievably happy when Luffy beats him because he is the next Joy Boy, the person that he's been waiting to be defeated by as well. So what we get from this is that all of these characters keep saying Joy Boy, not Nika. And this would be pretty odd if they were the same person, but there is even more to this idea because others make the claim that Luffy is just like Nika / the Sun God, aka the Warrior of Liberation. For instance, the Giants of Elbaf remark that Luffy looks like the Sun God or an ancient warrior from history. Vegapunk thinks that Luffy's Gear 5 resembles Nika and doesn't say a word about a Joy Boy. Who's Who first brings up the Warrior of Liberation to Jinbei. Fisher Tiger's Sun Pirates worship that very same Sun God, and it's pretty clear from Kuma's family that the Buccaneer race were Team Nika as well. But it goes way further back than just that, because we learned during Skypiea that the Sky Races also worshipped the actual Sun God. Now back at that time, of course, we didn't realize this was gonna be Nika, aka Luffy's Devil Fruit, but after Wano, and specifically Egghead Island, it's become very clear that they worshipped Nika. Though I do have to admit that there is one Sky Race that did worship Joy Boy specifically, because the Lunarians in the modern era, or at least the ones who raised King, were waiting for Joy Boy specifically. This was revealed during Kaido's flashback, where we do see him recruit Arbor, aka King, by saying that they are searching for the same man who is Joy Boy. So this could technically support the idea that Joy Boy and Nika were actually the same, but for all that we really know so far, they allied themselves with him during the Void Century because he was a reincarnation of Nika, someone who ate the same devil fruit as Luffy, but again, the timeline kind of contradicts that, so I do believe it's very much likely that these are two different people from two very different eras. Because another big point to consider here is that Nika's existence actually dates back way before the Void Century. Again, the Sky Races, Buccaneers, Giants, they all worship Nika, not Joy Boy, and these are super ancient races with history that predates the Void Century and Joy Boy by hundreds and more likely thousands of years. There's evidence that even points to Nika being on the planet for over 5,000 years ago, and this may also explain why other mythical zones seem to have ancient parallels. For example, the Buddha fruit that Sengoku uses could be another ancient god, as we know Odin talks about the Buddha in his logbook as well. Meanwhile, Kaido, the Azure Dragon, also draws inspiration from ancient Chinese and Japanese dragon mythology and could be connected to the ancient dragons that at some point went extinct in the One Piece world as well. And so with all of that in mind, logically speaking, Nika would have had to exist as an actual entity before Joy Boy, or else the Sun God Nika fruit wouldn't straight up make sense at all. So with all of that in mind, my base statement here is that I think it's very safe to assume that Joy Boy and Nika are separate people, and if you're not quite convinced yet, I'm confident by the end of this theory, you'll believe the same thing as I do. Now, looking at the actual time period before the Void Century, Oda of course hasn't given us a lot about this time period on One Piece, but based on what we do have, we're gonna explore what we do know and why it has led me to believe, and to strongly believe, that Joy Boy was one of the reincarnations of Nika, just like Luffy, and potentially many other people throughout history. In fact, Joy Boy accomplished everything he did during the Void Century because Nika's will passed on to them, or maybe the fruit chose them specifically because they were just so similar to Nika personality-wise, and so that just basically leaves us with one big question now: who was Nika? As I'll try to prove throughout this video, I think that the Sun God Nika was actually a really powerful Lunarian from outer space, and yes, I know I may sound like one of those ancient alien conspiracy theorists, but I promise this theory has a lot of merit, and it's all thanks to Enel's cover story. Very quick summary for you guys who aren't fully aware of Enel's great space adventure. After Skypiea, it's basically confirmed that Enel hopped into the Ark Maxime and flew up all the way to the moon, searching for the Fairy Worth, and there he found remnants of an old ancient civilization, battlefields, alien space pirates, and also these little automata guys that remind me of the Capcom mascots for some reason. Whatever. During his adventure, years, he came across a massive wall mural depicting the moon city Burka and 3 sky races, the Burkans, the Shandians, and the Skypians, who at some point all came down to this world from the moon. Interestingly enough, there's also this little flame in a globe inside here that is most likely the eternal flame, based on it being a huge power source capable of fueling the ancient weapons, and this entire moon base missing power after it was taken out. At least, until NL boosted it back to life using his electricity. So, what does any of this prove? Well, based on the city's name, the murals, and his goals of conquering the world in search of the Verth, I do believe that we're seeing the origins of the sky races on our One Piece planet. In fact, the name of this final cover story is "The name of the moon city was Burka, and due to a lack of resources, they set out for the blue planet." So it's pretty cut and dry, if you ask me at least. Like, Oda just wrote it down here for us. Especially considering that when they went down to the surface, they made a new city also called Burka, and that is where NL is actually from. So no, to me, the far more interesting point here is what's missing, which is the Lunarians. They are named after the moon. Luna, as the root word for Luna in Latin, is moon-like. So what is going on here? Why are they not on the moon, or were they never there? Like, why is it that the Lunarians weren't depicted here in a mural of sky races who came down from the moon, who are also angelic themed races with wings? And well, I believe it's because the Lunarians might have been the one who came down to the planet first, and considering that we don't see any of the sky races use technology from the ancient moon city, to me it seems very likely that the lunar base was actually left to the other sky races by the Lunarians. And then at some point, once these 3 other groups ran out of resources, they just followed the Lunarians down to the planet. Now, just to cover all bases here, I could be wrong and have it the other way around. It could be that the Lunarians came down after all the 3 other sky races already went down, but it doesn't make as much sense to me considering the murals, the timeline, and of course their namesake. This would explain why they needed to go to the blue planet, why the Lunarians aren't depicted in the murals, and possibly even why they had to bring the eternal flame down with them as they were going to join the Lunarians in their conquest. That's right, I said conquest, because I do really believe that the Lunarians came down to the planet led by these 4 gods of Earth, Forest, Rain, and the Sun to conquer and terraform the planet for their own needs. Now, I will say this is a bold statement for sure, so just give me some time to let me show you why I do believe that this is a real possibility. I do believe that Nika and the other gods were inspired by many ancient gods and mythologies, seeing as Oda, loves to pull from various mythological phenomenons in One Piece, but I do believe that their origins tie back really nicely to a little myth known as the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter, which is a Japanese monogatari or folktale that talks about the moon princess Kaguya Hime. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, you're probably a Naruto fan, as Kaguya Otsutsuki is clearly based on that very same mythology. Unfortunately, yes, it does seem like One Piece might actually be doing something very similar to Naruto's ending, but this time it will be good, make a lot of sense, and have a lot of foreshadowing, because this goes back, again, literally hundreds of chapters. So for now, all you really need to know is that Kaguya is an alien princess from the moon who came down to the planet Earth because she was punished by her own kind. And I actually want to come back to her specifically later, maybe you know what I mean, but for now, what's important is that I believe that Kaguya Hime helped at least inspire Nika and the other 4 gods, so let me break that down for you completely here. We first find out about the 4 gods of One Piece during Skypiea. They are prominent figures to the sky races, and they were known as the Rain God, the Earth God, the Forest God, and of course, Nika, the Sun God. Now, during Nolan's flashback 400 years ago, it was actually revealed that all 4 of these titles were falsely attributed to Kashigami, but seeing as Nika exists, I think it's very reasonable to assume that, much like Loki, Kashigami falsely took on these titles based on the people around him. Reminds me a little bit of Elbaf and everyone calling themselves the Sun God. So with that said, now that we've covered the Sun God Nika, what's up with these other 3 gods? Well, to be fair, we of course really don't know that much. We don't know, for example, if there are 3 more god devil fruits like this, but their titles and history might actually reveal a ton of information that Oda has hidden in the story. I think that we can gather that based on Nika's timeline, the Sun God and his companions seem to predate all 4 sky races. So based on my timeline that I laid out here, it only makes sense to me that all of the gods were in fact Lunarians. In case you don't remember, Whitebeard actually refers to the Lunarians as the gods who lived up on the red line, that they have a massive flame on their back and control fire powers, and that they were seemingly super advanced with their own tech based on the civilization on the moon. Now, Nika and the gods being Lunarians makes a lot of sense to me based on just these points, plus we still don't know what the eternal flame actually was, but considering that Vegapunk created a knockoff called the Mother Flame sometime after he performed a bunch of tests on King specifically, and it's a power source that's supposed to be infinite, the eternal flame could have been straight up Nika's Lunarian flame. So to me, that's just the most straightforward answer to what race these gods could have been, Lunarians known as gods, and, you know, everything else makes sense as well. But what about their roles? Like, why do I think that they have those titles? And why do we think that they wanted to terraform the One Piece planets? Well, let's for a moment really think about what they're named after. The Earth, the Forest, the Rain, and the Sun. Like, these are really specific when you really look at it. It's not like the fire god, the wind god, the water god, and the earth god. No, like, these choices seem oddly deliberate. Now, what first came to mind was gods from real mythologies that tied in, like Chak, the Mayan rain god, Gaia, the earth mother from Greco-Roman mythology, and Ra, the sun god from ancient Egypt. But you know, if you really look at it, these kind of didn't really have any solid tie-in or connection. And when I then tried to scramble through a bunch of other gods, you know, like, I couldn't really nail anything down here. So at that point, since I felt a little bit stuck, I instead turned back to the true ancient world of One Piece that we do know, what objects and places would have been around during the time already, and then it actually really hit me. There are 3 things that are super connected to all of these gods and might explain exactly what happened 5,000 years ago in the One Piece world. I'm talking about the trees. It's all about the trees. The Adam Tree on Elbaf, the Tree of Knowledge on Ohara, and the Sun Tree Eve above the Red Line. Like, these trees are all super ancient, at least over 5,000 years old. And let me ask you, do you know what really grows a tree? Like what do you really need to make a tree like this thrive? Earth to plant in, sun and rain to grow it, and eventually it births into a mighty forest. Now, I don't think that these gods were even gods strictly to begin with, nor do I think that they ruled over sunlight, laser beams, or typhoon rains, at least not at first. Instead, I do think that they were 4 super powerful Lunarians with technology to create massive farming and cultivation. Just how every ancient civilization in our world believed that gods came down to bring civilization, I think that these 4 gods brought farming and civilization with them to a world with titans and weak, struggling groups of people scattered across it. Now, I don't know about you at all, but if I was struggling to survive and someone showed up with basically all the answers, I'd probably listen to them, especially if they have crazy magic-looking powers. So I've come to the conclusion personally that they were probably not actually gods with super divine status, but instead these 4 people were extraterrestrial beings with insanely advanced technology and thus were just viewed as gods because that stuff looks like magic. As a result, there is a really good reason to believe that they might not even have had actual supernatural powers over earth, rain, and forest, but instead they just had the edgy black wings and flame control that we know from King. And those seem to be pretty solid reasons to me to worship someone as a god, plus it ties in pretty nicely into a bunch of points in One Piece and the real world as well. If you're curious, in the real world this ties in, for example, really well with the story of the Anunnaki, the gods from ancient Sumeria, where these gods were associated with descending from the heavens, tied to various celestial bodies, and then ruled over the land of Mesopotamia, the real-world origin, at least so far as we know, of civilization and agriculture. It is literally known as the Fertile Crescent due to its immense capacity for farming and growth. So maybe that's even a crescent moon connection if you really want to go hard and take that angle. But if you want to talk about something more pseudoscience-y and conspiracy theory-like, which I absolutely do because I'm really into that stuff, the Anunnaki also have a story similar to what seems to happen exactly in the ancient One Piece world. In the 1975 book, The 12th Planet, which is a really fun read, the Anunnaki are claimed to be these sort of advanced humanoid aliens from the planet Nibiru, Planet X or Planet 9, right? And they come to the Earth around 500,000 years ago to try and harvest all of its minerals, mostly to save their own atmosphere. Like basically they ran out of resources, kind of like the people on the moon, and needed to get them from somewhere else. So yes, it is with my utmost condolences and excitement that I do speculate that Oda is actually a strong fan of ancient aliens on the History Channel. To return to that story, they then also have hybrid babies with humans, a great flood happens, and then they have to teach the world farming. Now, in a previous video, I've actually already hypothesized that the Buccaneers might actually be this hybrid half-god, half-mortal race based on the Bible in my theory Bible piece. Not to mention the myth of Noah's flood and the other similar myths that predated, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, also have all of their origins in Mesopotamia. And as we all know, Oda loves flooding the One Piece world, as we found out. Like, that's his whole thing. That's the gag of the One Piece world. So, well, yes, some of this might sound crazy and weird. Both of these versions, the historically accurate or more accurate and the more fictional or esoteric retelling, both seem to inspire what we do see exactly happening during Enel's cover story. In fact, there is a lot of reason to believe that this story was the key inspiration for the sky races coming down to harvest the planet. I mean, look at what we know happens in the series with Enel and his arc Maxime. It does sound very familiar. In fact, kind of like most arcs in One Piece, Skypiea should be a sort of microcosm or smaller version of something greater that encapsulates the entire story. Let's look at the facts. Enel makes a giant space boat as the god of an angel race from the heavens. He does this to find a great amount of worth for his new kingdom, and his entire goal is just resource management and colonization, and he probably based this entire arc on some sort of ancient blueprints that he found in a temple from an era long before him. To me, the safe assumption here is Uranus, as Imu shows us in chapter 1060 that what we can very safely assume at this point is Uranus creates a very similar attack to Raigo. But I do also want to point out that the original blueprints could also have been the Noah deep beneath the seafloor. After all, it also is a massive arc-style ship and predates everything that we know about the modern One Piece era. Now, this all could of course be a subtle hint at something that I've believed for a really long time, and I recently brought it up in my Joy Boys Planet being Sake theories as well, which is the idea that the ancient weapons are actually much older than the Ancient Kingdom and even Joy Boy. And I'm pretty much convinced at this point that they weren't designed to be weapons at all, but instead super elaborate farming and terraforming tools instead. Because everything that we actually do know about these weapons ties in really well with what I've been saying all along. For example, we do know what Poseidon does, controlling fish and, well, the Sea Kings, and as I mentioned, it seems like Uranus can destroy land by raining down beams of light. Interestingly enough, this is also something that Vegapunk mentions during his speech in chapter 1115, as he says that their use is what ties it to the rising sea level. Pluton seems to have some connection to destroying the Earth, as it's claimed to destroy islands in one shot, and Tom refers to it as the most monstrous ship in history. And all of these objects are really tied to specific bloodlines or locations in the world, and their locations are explained in the poneglyphs, which is the physical story and leftovers from Joy Boy. Now, how do all of these tie in with the gods and Nika? Well, what do you need to do when farming and planting trees? Move the earth, dig a big hole, and then throw some fish at it? No, I mean, yeah, you need water. And we do know that activating the ancient weapons seems to raise the sea level as well. These weapons are also named after the celestial bodies and ancient gods as well. So this lines up already pretty nicely with how the Greco-Roman gods and the Anunnaki had planets named after them too. In fact, Oda has created a tie between the ancient weapons, celestial bodies, and the gods, and obviously he had a reason to do so, even if this idea that I specifically mentioned right now turns out to not be correct. Now, of course, there are some important counterpoints to address. For example, Frankie and Tom saying that Pluton was built in Water 7, but Frankie and Iceberg also immediately questioned how a ship like that could have even ever been built. And to me, this line of questioning could point at the ship being retrofitted at Water 7 to become a warship, or even the blueprints that Frankie has being a countermeasure to Pluton, which there have been like some weird translation issues. But I do do think that its true purpose was probably farming through some super advanced technological means. And I do mean full-on terraforming, farming on a massive global scale. And that would explain why Frankie questions how it could have ever been built to begin with, right? Now, what I've been talking about with the ancient weapons being farm tools actually has precedent in our real world as well, because many medieval farming tools evolved into modern weapons. Sickle scythes were used to farm wheat and clear grass, pitchforks were used to move hay, Japanese scythes were used to plant seeds at specific depths and distances, and even nunchucks were thought to be used to flail rice and grain. So interestingly enough, farm tools being retrofitted into weapons is actually fairly common in our real-world history, and so maybe this is exactly how the ancient weapons became known as weapons, because people in later generations didn't know what they were for and how to use them. Turns out anything can become a weapon if the urge to destroy stuff is strong enough. Now, my own actual idea here is that after the gods finished using the ancient weapons to terraform, the power to control the Sea Kings, destroy islands, raise the seas, and rain hell from above all became weapons of mass destruction, even though they were used to farm the planet, potentially creating even stuff like the Red Line, mountains, raising the seas, you know, the Grand Line. At some point they did get repurposed. Either on purpose or because the knowledge of what they were actually for got lost, they at some point might have been turned from farm tools to weapons by either the gods themselves or more likely the civilization that fought and then defeated the gods sometime after. And that may actually have been thanks to Nika. When I took a step back and zoomed out a little bit to analyze Nika again, oh, okay, not that far back, pull it back, okay, cool. So when I looked more into Nika and the things tied to him, I started to notice some really odd contradictions between him and his ties to the other gods. Nika is known as the sun god, but what about his powers really point to sun gods? Like Ra, Amaterasu, Sol, and Helios, these are all ancient gods who literally harness the power of light and the sun itself. You know, pulling the sun across the sky, being a physical manifestation of the sun itself, etc, etc. But Nika, his sun god powers are imagination and having a stretchy body. Plus, he's specifically tied to various places in the One Piece world, but the other gods are only tied to Shandora, Burka, and Skypiea, while no other race seems to comment on any of these other gods at all. Seriously, I do think that it's really important to note that the Giants, the Buccaneers, Kuma, and anyone who knows about Nika doesn't comment about any of the three other gods. They just talk about Nika, the warrior of liberation. Like, doesn't that contradict everything I've been saying so far? Would it make more sense that all of these titles are Nika's and just get thrown around inaccurately, like with Kashigami? And well, I guess sure, that could be the case, but I do think that something different is true here altogether. I believe the fact that the only god people remember is Nika, but not the other gods, is important because at some point, Nika became way more memorable than any of the other three. And as I talked about in Bible Piece and Titan Piece, part 1 of the series, I do believe that it's because Nika's true role is the god of rebellion, and his first great war was waged against the gods 1,500 years ago. And while I'll talk about exactly why 1,500 years ago is important in part 3, Calendar Piece, for now we can talk about what happened and why I think that Nika betrayed his own kind. The reason I think this is because he's referred to as the warrior of liberation and actively appears throughout history in some way, shape, or form to help free the oppressed from the shackles. Luffy is doing exactly that right now. Joy Boy probably did that during the Void Century, and so I believe that this cycle was established originally by Nika himself. And considering all of the wild mythological ties to him, Joy Boy and Luffy, I do think how he rebelled is pretty obvious. I think that Nika turned on his own kind, the gods of the Red Line, and fought alongside the people of the One Piece world to free them from the rule of the Lunarians. Now, in Bible Piece, I made the claim that this sort of rebellion against the gods is what actually tied Nika, Joy Boy, and Luffy to Lucifer, but this same sort of divine rebellion exists in a bunch of things that inspired One Piece. Sun Wukong and the even older Hanuman are two monkey gods who clearly inspired Luffy and they actively fought for their freedom against the other gods. Lucifer fell from heaven and became a fallen angel after he fought against God and his fellow angels with a third of heaven, and his design heavily influenced, of course, the Lunarians' design as well, with their black wings and the fire theme. Kaguya Hime, who I talked about previously as well, was actually sent to the planet due to some great crime that she committed against the other gods on the moon. And I didn't mention it earlier because it would have probably thrown me completely off my train of thought, but this is the exact place to tie in the Anunnaki back as well, because their myths predate a bunch of mythology, and it does seem that some of their stories inspired Greek mythology, Indian mythology, like, inspired all of these godly pantheons around the world. You can tie back the betrayal of the Titans in Greek mythology to this ancient race that Oda seems to be inspired by. In Greek mythology, Kronos, a Titan, overthrew his father Uranus, a different Titan, and this then happened a second time when Zeus, a god, overthrows his father Kronos and then creates this sort of cosmic cycle of betrayal and overthrowing the previous powers, which then continues with Prometheus, who brings fire to the humans of the world against the god's wishes, whose mythology probably is also connected with that of Lucifer. Now, if all of this is starting to sound a little bit familiar, there is a reason, because it is exactly what seems to have happened in the One Piece world as well. Here's the sort of story that I think might have occurred in the One Piece world over and over again, so it's time for another story time with Manu section. Nika and the gods came down from the moon, using the ancient weapons to till the land and plant their massive god trees. At first, the world revered them after they defeated the Titans, and they nested themselves on top of the Red Line. But after some time, they became cruel gods, demanding sacrifices, as I believe this is why the Shandorans eventually began to do this with Kishigami. Nika noticed the innocent people of the One Piece world suffering and started to stand up against his own kind. He helped them using his eternal flame to power the ancient farm tools and turn them into weapons so that the people of this world could liberate themselves from their suppressors. But I also think that he was not quite strong enough himself, and because of that, he lost, much like Joy Boy did during the Void Century, and this might be exactly why his powers don't line up with him in the past. Now, this next part is a little bit wild as well, but I do think it may be the case that Nika didn't even have any crazy imagination powers to begin with at this point, and that these powers only came into existence in the One Piece world after the devil fruit trees that they planted bore a fruit containing his will, his desires, and his dreams. Of course, the origins of devil fruits are one of the greatest mysteries in the entire One Piece story, and the best thing we've gotten so far as an explanation is Vegapunk's idea that they were born from the will and dreams of people in the ancient past, so let's run with that idea and tie it into everything that I've talked about. The gods who planted these massive trees might have just been waiting until they bore fruit. By the way, I do know this sounds a lot like the big 10-tailed tree that they sprout in Naruto, so I'm sorry about that. It's similar inspirations. All right. The gods who planted these massive trees might have just been waiting until they bore fruit. The moon clearly couldn't sustain these plants, so they needed to plant them on the blue planet. We can actually see this inspiration in the history of the sky races running out of Earth and pursuing the blue planet, but maybe they needed the blue planet for these trees specifically, trees that could create fruits of immense power, turning angels into true gods with powers that match their wills and thoughts. Again, classic Naruto behavior over here. And that's why, despite being the sun god, one of the deities who brought farming and agriculture to this world, Nika's powers ended up being based on imagination and his will to liberate the world. So, to be the most free person, to free those around him, this power manifested within his devil fruit. And considering that he's bringing the new dawn, the sun god title still fits pretty well, I think. Once again, this idea does have a strong basis in a bunch of ancient legends as well. There's the tree of knowledge of good and evil from Abrahamic religions, the tree that had the forbidden fruit that Eve ate in the Bible. In the Journey to the West with Sun Wukong, the ginseng fruit tree produces 30 pieces of fruit every 9,000 years and turns those who eat the fruits immortal. And Yggdrasil, the world tree in in Norse mythology was the tree that Odin sacrificed himself to grant humanity magical power and poetry. And of course, Oda very clearly also doesn't mind mixing myths and legends together because the Adam tree is the massive world tree in the Nordic islands. On top of that, even in One Piece, the trees in Wano and in Shandora are all sacred due to their connection to the spirit and souls of the ancestors. These motives are very clearly present throughout the entire story, and I do believe that the roots of them all go much deeper and further back to the Age of Titans and the Age of Nika than we all previously thought. The Nika fruit, which may be the strongest of the Great Devil fruits, eventually seems to find its way to the next Liberator, the person whose dream is closest to Nika's, and that's why everyone who seems to use it helps change the world. They use their power to stand against strong foes like the gods, the ancient kingdom, and the world government, and it's why Vegapunk says that the war from the Void Century never ended, and I think it goes much further back than even that. What I'm trying to say here is that there seems to be this endless cycle of death and destruction, slavery and rebellion, and endless sorrow with little pockets of freedom and happiness in between. A cycle that Nika is right in the center of. And I will be exploring that in much more depth in the next part of this mega theory, breaking down why the secrets of the One Piece world may be revealed in a key moment 1,500 years before Luffy was born, and how at that point this endless cycle of chaos occurs, and why Luffy will be the one to finally break the wheel and save the world. Well, this does make me wonder, how will Luffy do it? How is he gonna find the ancient weapons, free the world from its chains, and uncover the true history alongside everyone's favorite baddie Nico Robin? Well, as a little addition to this mega theory, I think that the answer lies in a secret society who has helped shape the One Piece world and pass the true history forward in time as well. They are known as the Bragmen, people framed as liars, but actually the people who have been preparing someone to free this world with the true history as they have explored the One Piece world for centuries. And if that sounds interesting to you, and I promise it is, you can learn all about it in the video below me, breaking down everything that we know and what might happen to them as well. Otherwise, thanks so much to all my Patreons. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Please consider helping out the channel. And otherwise, I will hopefully see you in that next one. Thanks for watching.